Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay? All right, so let's get started here. All right, so my name is Elizabeth Denchel, and I work at the Hoover Library in West Branch, Iowa, and we are part of the National Archives and Records Administration. You can see up here, I got a picture of the Hoover Dam. And so what I want you guys to think about, I want you guys to pick someone to come up and talk. Why do you think that we build dams? What do you think? Talk some stuff out in class and pick one reason to tell me. It looks like we have a student at West Can, Kansas. I don't know the school name.
I think we build them to have lower waters.
To have lower waters for flood control? Okay, that's a good one. Then we have, do we have a student at Puesta del Sol?
To keep the water clean.
To keep the water clean, okay.
We also had a student say to make sure they only let a certain amount of water out at a time.
Yeah. For controlled releases. All right, so let's look at some of those reasons. To reduce or prevent flooding, so like we were talking about, controlling the water flow. Providing water for domestic industry and irrigation purposes, so that's likely farming, right? Providing hydroelectric power, which we'll look at. Dams and their reservoirs provide recreation areas for fishing and boating. And so we'll look at that, but when a dam is built, the water that accumulates behind it is a reservoir and it's a man-made lake. And we're gonna look at the one that is with the Hoover Dam today. So I'm putting up here, there's 4 examples of what dams look like. And these are the 4 types that we build. And the red arrows that are up here on the screen represent force. And if you guys pay attention in science, you know what force is. And so for a dam to hold the water back, it has to respond with equal or greater force. So up in the upper left-hand corner, we have the arch dam. And you can see that the arrows, the water is forcing itself up against the dam. The dam pushes together and down into the ground to keep that water back. Next to that, we have the embankment dam, and this is the most commonly built dam in the United States because usually you can make it from things that are already at the site. It has a waterproof core, and then it usually has sand or kind of earth on top of it, and it relies on its weight. So you can see those red arrows, the force is pushing down into the ground while the water is pushing against it. The next one is a buttress dam, and as the water pushes against the dam uses its weight to push down, and then it has buttresses behind it that push back against the water. So it's responding with 2 points of force. The next one is the gravity dam, and gravity dams are extremely heavy, and they depend on the force of their weight. So they're pushing down into the ground to resist that water from pushing forward. And I want you guys to think about these and try to remember them because I'm going to ask you later what type of dam you think the Hoover Dam is. So Herbert Hoover comes into the picture long before he's the president. He's not elected president until 1928 and isn't sworn in until 1929. So he's the Secretary of Commerce. He's appointed by Coolidge, so he serves under Calvin Coolidge. And in 1921, he starts talking about the need for a dam. In 1927, the Mississippi River flooded. It overflowed the banks. There was mass damage across the country, and Herbert Hoover arrived on scene with the Red Cross and said, we don't need the might of the government, we need the might of Main Street to fix it. So corresponding with or cooperating with local officials, Hoover was able to coordinate relief and rebuilding with just cities and local areas. But he came to view flood control as a vital issue for the United States. The United States could not keep growing westward without flood control and without irrigation waters to water crops. So one of his first proposals was a dam on the Colorado River at the Boulder Canyon. And I should let you guys know that part of the reason Hoover was so smart about this was that he was an engineer. He was one of the first people to graduate from Stanford in California, and he had a degree in geology, and he went on to become a very successful mining engineer. Now, I have on here a snippet from one of his speeches that he gave in 1932, and we'll look at it later, but he really explains the importance of why the Boulder Dam was so important. To understand its purpose, our people must realize that the Colorado River and its freshets from the snow of the Rocky Mountain flows at a rate as great as that of Niagara. He's talking about Niagara Falls. In the dry season, it diminishes to less than 5% of its maximum flow. So that means, guys, when it snows on the top of the mountains and it's holding that snow up high, down in the deserts in Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, that there's no water running down from the mountains down into the river. It's almost a trickle, according to what he's saying. And then when that snow starts to melt in the summer, then we have a flood, right? The purpose of the dam, therefore, is to store the freshet, and the amount of water is so gigantic in its proportions that the lake created behind it is over 100 miles long and will require the entire flow of the river for more than 2 years to fill it. So he's talking about building that reservoir behind it. And the reservoir behind the Hoover Dam is called Lake Mead. To this day, it's the largest man-made lake in the United States. So he forms the Colorado River Commission in 1922 to resolve some of these interstate claims to water and electricity. And so I want to talk to you guys a little bit about what that means. So in the United States, we're one country, but we have 50 states that can make their own individual laws. And even within the states, counties and cities can make their own laws. And so what happens is when you cross into another state, sometimes they have a different law. So take Iowa, for example, we have lots of crops of corn. So you might be able to spray something on your crops in Iowa that you cannot spray on your yard in Florida. So there's a lot of things that need to be resolved, and that's one of the things the Secretary of Commerce does. They regulate commerce and laws between states to make sure that they are following federal law and to make sure that there is no blocks between states for trade and sales. So after they start talking about building this dam, water wars ensue. Water is very, very important across the entire globe. Who gets it? How much do they get? What can they use it for? So there are several states that join this fight: Arizona, California, Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming. And they start trying to work on this. The commission met for 2 weeks. They were meeting for 10 hours a day. And so Hoover finally proposed dividing the river basin into 2 regions, the upper basin states and the lower basin states. And this came to be called the Hoover Compromise. The Hoover Compromise was also called some other things after they agreed to sign it, but they signed an agreement November 24th, 1922, and they decided to divide the water at a later date. It was ratified by the individual state legislatures and became official on June 25th, 1929, and then was signed by the newly elected president, Herbert Hoover. This is, you guys see the picture, that is from the 70th Congress of the United States of America, and it's the Boulder Canyon Project Act. So we're going to talk a little bit about Congress and what Congress does here. So all appropriation bills originate in the House of Representatives. And so in order to build something as massive as a public works project like a dam, like the Hoover Dam, there was going to have to be money approved for it or earmarked for it, we say. So this bill originates in Congress. It's the Boulder Canyon Project Act, and it's authorized the construction of a dam in Boulder or Black Canyon for an all-American canal to connect the Imperial and Coachella valleys with the Colorado River, and divided the lower basin waters among the upper basin state or the lower basin states. The act appropriated $165 million for the construction of this, and they listed the primary purposes as flood control, improvement of navigation on the Colorado River, storage and delivery of water for reclamation and other beneficial uses, and generation of power. And this is important because Herbert Hoover promised that if the dam generated hydroelectric power, that it would pay for itself. And Hoover had an interesting view of government. He thought that government should have really limited power and limited authority in our day-to-day lives. And so he did not want the federal government to actually produce and distribute electric power. He wanted to rent the electric power plants to companies that would sell the electricity, and they would take money on a lease type basis. The Boulder Canyon Project Act became effective on June 25th, 1929, following the ratification of the Colorado River Compact by 6 of the 7 states of the Colorado River Basin. The 7th state did eventually sign on to the project. So let's look at the building of the dam. This is a picture of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Of course, he was elected after President Hoover. And this is from one of our Hoover engineering notebooks, which I'll show you. On March 4th, 1931, the Bureau of Reclamation opens bids for the building of the dam. The Bureau of Reclamation is the agency that is charged with caring for and operating the dam, and they are still the agency that does that to this day. On March 11th, 1931, the contract is awarded to 6 companies for $48,890,955. And the 6 companies is not the name of a construction group or company. It's the name that they gave 6 different companies who came in as contractors doing different jobs to build the dam. The dam is so big and such a massive project that there wasn't one contractor that could do everything. On September 30th, 1935, President Roosevelt dedicates the Boulder Dam. And you can see that down here in this picture that he's dedicating it. On March 1st, 1936, the dam is handed over to the federal government by the 6 companies, 2 years ahead of schedule and about $1 million under budget, which is super amazing for a public works project. And it turns out that President Hoover was right. By May 1987, the entire cost of the building of the dam was paid back to the US Treasury with interest. So now I want to look at some of these engineering books. This is a picture from our archives. After the dam was built, the 6 companies gifted 3 volumes of photographs to Hoover. If you're in any engineering or STEM classes now, you might work on an engineering notebook. And in those notebooks, we draw pictures of what we think we're going to make and how we change it until we get to a final product, right? Well, in these engineering notebooks, they actually kept a photographic record of each step of building of the dam. And they're really, really remarkable photographs. And you see they had it embossed for Herbert Hoover. These are some pictures from inside of that book. This is one of my favorites. It says, the United States Department of Interior, Bureau of Reclamation, Boulder Canyon Project, pouring the 2nd millionth cubic yard of concrete in the dam, 12 months after the start of the project. And 6 companies, contractors is on there. On the other side, this is a picture of the dam in progress. It's kind of towards the base, but it was so hot in the region that they were building the dam that the concrete actually would not cure. It would not cool off enough to dry. So they had to pour it in 5-foot increments. And eventually they ran in cooling tubes through it that ran cold water through it to help it cool down. If they had attempted this in a continuous concrete pour, it still wouldn't be dry. So this is the Hoover Dam as it's starting to crop up in the press, and they're starting to tell the public about it. And I love this New York Times cover because it's the artist rendition of what the Hoover Dam is going to look like. And there was a lot of stock placed into how pretty it was because this was the 30s and there was beautiful Art Deco architecture, which was definitely built into the Hoover Dam. So you can see on the left, and we'll talk about this more, they start talking about what they're going to call this project. It says Hoover Dam in Black Canyon displaces the name of Boulder. It was the Boulder Dam, and then the Hoover Dam, and then the Boulder Dam, and then the Hoover Dam again. And we'll kind of get into it, but they're all the same thing, no matter what we call it here. This is a survey of the Hoover Dam after it's built. And if you look right in the middle, it says Boulder Dam, and then it has power plant to the right of that. So I want you guys in your classes right now to talk about, you remember I showed you those dams. There was arch, there was embankment, there was buttress, and gravity. What type of dam do you think the Hoover Dam is? Looking at this picture. I'll give you guys a minute to talk about it and pick someone to come up to the camera and let me know. All right, Kansas.
Arch.
You think arch?
Arch Dam.
Arch Dam, okay. All right, so Puesta del Sol agrees Arch Dam. Okay, you guys are both right. You're 50% right. So the Hoover Dam is actually a combination of two types of construction. One is a gravity dam and the other is the arch dam. And so when they scouted the area looking for the right place to build the Hoover Dam, this location was chosen because of how they could fit an arch into the geography. Now this type of map shows, it's called topography, and you see all these squiggly lines up high and down low here, and they show us elevation. And the elevation that these lines are showing us are actually below sea level. Sea level is where all things are equal. Mountains sit above sea level, and then this sits below sea level. The Grand Canyon sits below sea level. And so you can see along the shoreline some of these lines, especially above the word Nevada, where it's talking about, or where it's showing you how low those rocks are going below sea level. This is an interesting thing to look at because Hoover used to make surveys like this in the 1800s with his survey crew. And it was one of the things that he learned to do at Stanford. And he actually helped to do surveys of this area with the US Geographical Society when he was a student and when he was a new graduate. If we look at this, you guys can see on the lower corner, it says Nevada, and in the upper corner, it says Arizona. The Colorado River here is a natural boundary for the states. So this is why there's so much tension about who's going to get control of the water and who is going to get control of the hydroelectric power plants. If you look at the map right in the middle on the dam, it shows you where it says power plant. There's circles that are on the Arizona side and there are circles that are on the Nevada side. And those are electric plants. So each state side got a hydroelectric power plant. So we are going to look at, these are some awesome pictures. There was another book made by the Bureau of Reclamation, looked very similar to the Six Companies book. And this book lives in the National Archives in Denver, Colorado. So if you ever get out there, you can ask to see it if you feel like it. But this is looking downstream from the Hoover Dam, and you can see the water shooting out of it. And those are called controlled releases. If you look at the one picture that shows Lake Mead behind it, you can see that the lake is kind of high. So the way that they stop it from breaching or going over the dam is to do these controlled releases to let some water out of the lake and down into the river. And that's also how they send river downstream for irrigation as well. I love this picture of the Hoover Dam at night. I just think it looks really cool, and you can see the electricity that it is also generating itself to keep running. There's another picture of it during the day here. These are people driving over the Hoover Dam on your left, and if you see those big towers, those are the penstocks. And we're going to talk about penstocks in a little bit, but those are the intakes for the water. Now there's a road that runs kind of parallel to the dam that you can drive over. They've kind of shut down traffic on the Hoover Dam right now. You can see on this other picture that this is some of the construction of the dam. And notice there's no water. They built huge diversion tunnels that went into the rocks that are around where the dam is built and diverted the water around where they were building the dam to keep it dry enough to build. And so this is kind of what it looked like in the ending stages of construction. So in 1932, Hoover goes to the Hoover Dam, and he says in this speech that it wasn't the first time he'd visited the dam, but this is the only picture we have of him at the dam. And that is his wife, Lou Henry Hoover, on his left, and on his right is Wilbert Lyman, and we'll talk about him in a little bit. The speech that Hoover gives is pictured here, and I grabbed a little excerpt of it, and it says, "This dam is the greatest engineering work of its character ever attempted by the hand of man. Its height alone is nearly 700 feet, making it more than 100 feet higher than the Washington Monument, and far higher than any other such construction ever undertaken." And he continues, "It is now 10 years since I became chairman of the Colorado River Commission. That commission solved in a unique way the legal conflicts as to water rights among 6 of the states which had long held up any possibility of the realization of these works. This was accomplished after 3 years of negotiation, finally closing with the Santa Fe Compact. It was the first time that a provision in the Constitution of the United States for treaties among the several states was utilized on such a great scale. That compact was ratified by 6 of the states and is held open to the 7th to join at any time it may desire. It cleared out the legal underbrush in a way that enabled the next step to be taken. And I again had the satisfaction of presenting, both as an engineer and as head of the commission, to President Coolidge and to the Congress, the great importance of these works. And I had further part in drafting of the final legislation which ultimately brought them into being. He was incredibly proud of the Hoover Dam project for his entire life. And as you could tell, he was an engineer. He was very invested in the United States and the Constitution. And so to find a constitutional resolution to water rights and to other problems was really, really important to Hoover. So now we're going to talk about the name. Is it the Hoover or the Boulder, and what happened here, right? September 17th, 1930. This is way before the Hoover Dam is built, right? Secretary of Interior Ray Lyman Wilbur. We saw him in this picture here. That's this guy pointing, right? He says, the dam would be named the Hoover Dam to honor the work of the great engineer. Well, the United States had never named anything after anybody. It wasn't a thing yet, and it wasn't anything anybody wanted to do. And then there's a little bit of backstory because Hoover leaves office. Hoover leaves office as a Republican that only was the president for one term, and the Great Depression is boiling up at this point. Well, it's rumored that FDR did not really like Hoover. His staff really did not like Hoover. And so they refused to call it the Hoover Dam, and they started calling it the Boulder Dam or the Boulder Canyon Dam. And eventually that was going to change again. You see, President Herbert Hoover was really well known for being a great statesman, and he was an advisor to every president until he died when he was a very, very old man in the 60s. And he was good friends with Harry Truman. So Harry had supported the idea of officially naming the dam the Hoover Dam. And in 1947, a House resolution, which is pictured up here, was introduced to restore the name to the Hoover Dam. It passed the Senate and then was signed into law by Hoover's friend Harry Truman. And now when we name monuments and historic sites and things like that, that's usually done by executive order because it makes the process easier. We know if a bill is going to become law, the same exact bill has to pass the House of Representatives, the United States Senate, and it has to be signed by the President of the United States. So using an executive order to do naming just simplifies the process. And down here in the corner, you can see the plaque that's dedicated to Hoover at the Hoover Dam. And it says Hoover Dam, named in honor of Herbert Clark Hoover, the 31st President of the United States. And that buffalo seal on the bottom is from the Department of the Interior, which they manage the Bureau of Reclamation, the National Park Service, some other things you might notice. These are two of my favorite pictures from the Hoover Dam construction, and these are in those engineering notebooks that were given to Herbert Hoover. And you can see in this construction picture, the boxes, the 5-foot by 5-foot boxes that were built to pour concrete so it could dry and they could add another one. You can also see the pipes running out of the front of it that were passing cold water through it to help cool the dam. And I love the picture of the guys standing in one of the pipe tunnels because it shows you how enormous these pipes were that were used to build the dam. So let's talk a little bit about the dam and some of its statistics. It is 726.4 feet from the foundation to the roadway where the dam crests. It weighs 6,600,000 tons. I told you guys it's a concrete arch gravity dam. The maximum water pressure at the base of the dam is 45,000 pounds per square foot. And there is 4,360,000 cubic yards of concrete built into the dam. So now we are going to watch a cool video about the Hoover Dam so you guys can see what it looks like now because it has changed, but it gives you a little bit of the history and you can see the geography of where the dam is.
This surprisingly lush landscape has been coaxed from the desert with water from the Carson River.
Hey,
The series of pleasant captures the water. A wide-ranging irrigation system delivers it to farms and homes. It's part of a statewide network designed to help nearly bone-dry Nevada make the most out of every drop of water it gets. And nothing else in that network, or just about anywhere else, does that job in a bigger way than this icon of American ingenuity, the Hoover Dam. The dam was constructed on the Colorado River. All too often, this powerful river was overflowing its banks, flooding fields and causing millions of dollars in crop damage, while other farmers weren't getting the water they needed. So, in 1929, the U.S. government announced that it would try to tame this wild river by constructing what was then the world's largest dam. Launched in the midst of the Great Depression, word of the Hoover Dam project triggered a flood of hungry workers from across the country into Nevada. For the next 5 years, they labored here in up to 100-degree conditions. It wasn't just grueling, It was also extremely dangerous. Men known as high scalers clambered along the cliffs at the river's edge and then dangled down hundreds of feet on ropes to drill holes for dynamite that blasted away the canyon walls. Then the lowest paid workers, called muckers, used shovels to scoop up the dynamited rock for removal. Dozens of others labored deep underground, drilling out 4 3/4-mile tunnels that would temporarily divert the raging Colorado River around the site. Falling rocks, carbon monoxide, tough bosses, and long hours created dangerous conditions. At least 96 workers were killed on the job. If it had been built in a single continuous pour, the concrete would have taken more than a century to cool. So workers had to build the 726-foot-high dam 5 feet at a time, using individual buckets of concrete that sped down to them on cables every 78 seconds. It's still possible to see these individual pores etched in the face of the curve. When they were finally finished on March 1st, 1936, 2 years ahead of schedule, their handiwork was hailed as an engineering marvel, the 8th wonder of the modern world. It was also an aesthetic triumph, thanks to its elegant proportions, futuristic design, and Art Deco details. It's visually stunning from the air, but that makes it easy to forget just how critical the engineering of the Hoover Dam remains today. If it ever gave way, it could unleash a wall of water so high it could flood an area the size of Connecticut 10 feet deep, destroy vital irrigation systems across the American Southwest, and leave millions without drinking water.
So I hope that gives you guys a little bit of an idea of what the dam looks like now. Let me get out of here. Here we go. It's really quite remarkable. So now we're going to look at how the water is used. And this is from 1971 to 2005, but it actually hasn't changed much since the dam opened. You can see in the appointment of the water that Mexico gets 9% of the water, and they were added to the water agreement in 1944 that they get some of the water. I read recently that California is using all of the overflow water that other states are not using because they're in such a terrible drought and have been for quite a while. And then you can see what they're using it for. Mostly it's being used for irrigation. So that means watering crops or, you know, different lands and stuff like that. Livestock being another part of that. Mineral, thermal, electric, other, and then it says outside systems as well. So I want to look at how the dam generates electricity, and we're going to get to see someone from inside the dam explain how it works and what it looks like. But these are all of the moving parts of it, and he's going to break it down and talk about what this stuff does. And so basically it's converting the water, it's turning a big turbine, which generates electricity using electromagnets. And you'll get to see what that looks like here in just a second. I'm going to pull that up for us.
Oh my gosh, would you look at that?
Look at the size of this.
We're inside the power plant, and I'm guessing those are turbines? Those are turbines down there, Mike? Those, oh, you said turbine.
Those are our main generating units. The turbines themselves are actually what turns the rotor and runs the generator.
Gotcha, so there you go. That's where the electricity is being made. Now show me how they make the electricity.
Basically, it takes water in an H intake tower, into a 30-foot diameter pipe called the penstock. Brings the water down into around the dam through tunnels, and then it diverges off at each generating unit into a 13-foot pipe called the lateral penstock. And each one of those feeds through a butterfly valve into the scroll case, which turns the turbine, which in turn turns the shaft, which turns the rotor inside the generating unit and creates your electric power.
So the water gets sucked in, turns a propeller, basically, and that's the turbine right here.
That's correct. The turbine is actually right here around the scroll case.
Yeah, I was saying turbine, so
That's okay.
Don't tell me when I said that, Mike. I'm sorry.
The turbine's here, and then basically it takes the pressure of the water flowing through, turns the turbine, which transmits that energy into a mechanical energy
Right.
through the shaft and the rotor.
There's magnets or something in there.
The turbine becomes an electromagnet.
Okay.
The electromagnet turns through the stator coils, which transfers the mechanical energy into electrical energy. Then it flows out with less pressure out into the tailgate.
That's awesome.
Continuing the Colorado River.
Dude, look at this.
So that's from inside the dam and looking at it. And now we're going to see when they go underneath the dam and see what that looks like, because that is also super cool.
Down underneath the generating units, I see. Oh, it's gonna get even louder? Oh my goodness, okay. We'll see what happens. Oh, holy moly! Look at that!
Bomb in that red part of the pump, okay? And the water that's right below the screen.
Wow, okay, so the water's going in down here. The turbine's in there?
Below this.
Okay, and then, wow, that's amazing. Holy cow.
A lot of amazing.
So these parts of the dam are, this part of the dam is not open to the public. So if you go to the Hoover Dam, you will not be able to see that just because it's not safe. And you guys saw how fast that was moving. So it's just not safe. So I'll pull this back up so we can look at it. And now you have a better idea of what these things actually look like when they're working, which is really, really cool. That water is coming in super fast and spinning that turbine. If you guys have wind turbines like we have in Iowa, those are spinning and creating electricity the same exact way. So this is what the Hoover Dam looks like today. And if you guys look at the picture here, you can see the white marks that are on the shores of the Colorado River. And that's because the water is actually at a historic all-time low right now. And those are the original watermarks for how high the water used to be. And since there is a shortage of water, there's of course more water wars to be had. So states are currently fighting over who gets water and how much of it they get and what they can do with it. So that is always one of the questions now. And I think it'll be personally interesting to see if, since we've gotten all the snowfall this year, if it will generate enough water to kind of lift Lake Mead back up. So the generators inside of the dam generate enough electricity to power 750,000 homes, and each generator weighs as much as 4.5 fully loaded Boeing 747s. So they are enormous hydroelectric power turbines that are making water. I know they say that you heard in the film, and I'll restate it again, they said about 96 people died making the dam. They don't really have accurate count on that because people died sometimes after working. There was those big diversion tunnels that they were in the tunnels with equipment and they didn't have exhaust. So they were breathing in carbon monoxide, and they would die of carbon monoxide later in the day, which is sad and unfortunate. So I'd be happy to take some questions from your classes. If you guys have questions, you can line up at the camera and I will do my best to answer them. Oh, Danae, did I say that right? Okay, yeah, go ahead. There you go. What's your question? Oh, I can't hear Danae. If you write it down on paper, maybe hold it up, I can answer it. I'll pause and go to Kansas. What's your guys' question?
Is it the largest dam?
It is not the largest dam. It does have the largest reservoir. It was the largest built at the time. I think it's still the largest in the United States, though. Puesta del Sol, did you guys have a question?
Why is it losing water?
We're not getting enough rainfall to fill it up. So it's just precipitation that's slowing it down right now. Oh no, I can't see Danae's question.
Danae, you could also write it in the chat feature as well, and I can get it over to Elizabeth.
Okay. Go ahead, Kansas.
How did they divert the water?
They built those big diversion tunnels. I don't know if you remember seeing the picture. Let me see if I can put it back up there for us, because it is a pretty cool picture. Oh, well, we can see it in this map. Up along the sides of the dam, it has a 50-foot diversion tunnel and then another diversion tunnel. So they opened those tunnels up as the water was flowing down, and it would go out into those tunnels and arrive at the other side so that it would stay dry so they could build the dam in the middle of it.
Okay, go ahead and ask him.
Why can't we drive on it anymore?
It's just about safety. Do you remember when we watched the video, they said that if the dam broke, that it would unleash enough water to flood Connecticut under a foot of water. So some of it is just making sure that there isn't any like any bad things that would happen on the dam to cause it to break or anything like that. In World War II, they actually built big gun like lookouts next to the dam, and they put soldiers in them to make sure that the dam wasn't attacked because it would cause massive damage during the war. So it's a wonder, and people can visit it, but it's also, they protect it because they want to keep people safe. And Danae asked how tall it was. 726 feet tall from the base of the dam up to where you can drive on it on that top part.
Go ahead.
Does the water overflow?
It does not. I'll bring up those pictures again where they do controlled releases of the dam water. You can see it in these pictures. So it comes from those penstocks, and they just release the water so that it won't overflow, and it's never overflowed. So it's pretty safe bet it'll keep working.
I was wondering why they built it out of two types of dams, not just one.
That's a good question. So the engineers, when they had looked at the dam and how they wanted to build it, they wanted to make sure that they built something that would last for a very long time and definitely would not fail. I'm sure you guys can remember, or you guys won't remember, but maybe you learned about it during hurricane or after Hurricane Katrina. The levees of those dams actually failed. They were old. They weren't built to hold as much water as they were holding back, and they failed. And so the Hoover Dam, when they built it, they knew that they were building it to hold back a lot of water. And so they wanted it to be structurally sound. And so to do that, they chose to combine the arch and the gravity dam to make sure that it would always be there, basically. Puesta del Sol.
Has anybody attacked the dam before?
Has anybody what?
Attacked the dam?
Attacked. No. But that's why they had soldiers out guarding it during World War II. And that's another reason that they built that extra road there, so that it didn't give any bad people access to the dam so that they could attack it. So they've taken steps to make sure that they protect the people who live downstream from the dam.
What are the box things in the picture up there?
Oh, like the little concrete boxes? Those are the old diversion tunnels. You can see in the picture on the right, there's 3 of them. There's 2, and then there's the other one. Those are those, here, let me flip to there. That's the exits of these tunnels, these diversion tunnels you can see along the bottom of this picture that are like little hash marks.
I was wondering how old it is.
Well, if you remember, we looked at, it opened in 1936 officially. It was handed over to the federal government. So it is coming up close on its 100th birthday. I bet it has a great birthday party. Let's see, we can do some quick math and figure out exactly how old it is this year. It is 83 years old this year. 83 years old the other day, actually. It was his birthday. Are there any more questions?
Popular because it made the dam.
Go ahead.
Was Hoover popular because he made the dam?
Hoover was not a popular president. When he was sworn into office, they called him the most popular man in the world because he was a great humanitarian, and people really, really loved Herbert Hoover. But after the Great Depression started to settle in, he became less popular. And when he left office, he wasn't very popular at all. But after the Great Depression had kind of started to be relieved, he became very popular with future presidents and with other people. Puesta del Sol, did you guys have another question? No? Okay. All right, well then I think we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you guys so much for joining us today and hanging out with us and learning about the Hoover Dam. I hope you guys get to visit one day. You can buy a ticket and go in and see that hydroelectric plant and tour the dam. Thank you for joining us.
Say thank you.
Thank you.
Say thank you.
Thank you guys.